Before I continue any further, I just want to say everything that I am stating or claiming in this video is all speculation and is purely just my opinion on things and is not saying anything is fact. It is all alleged, I promise. Everything is just how I feel and not factual, I guess. Yeah, I just want to make that clear that like what I'm saying, because I was about to upload this and then I got really stressed because I was like, I don't want people to like take this the wrong way. This is just how I feel based on what I've seen on the show and what I could find online, but it's all just alleged and my own opinion on the matter. Great. Enjoy the video. So I think after watching The Truman Show, we're all a little bit crypto. We're like, oh my god, is my entire life a lie? Am I even existing right now? Is this my real life? Have I been lied to my entire life? Is everyone around me actors? Is my whole life just for entertainment? Which honestly guys, yeah, right now, yeah, my whole life lives for entertainment for the next 2 months when I'm off from uni. But anyway, I think we can all agree though that The Truman Show, if it existed in real life, it would be incredibly cruel. We deem it unethical, and a lot of people would probably just call it downright evil. We would have a lot of activists probably pining against it. We'd say it isn't fair to put someone's life on camera when they don't consent or know that they're being shown. So that's why I'm kind of questioning right now why everyone has just fallen in love with the show Jury Duty on Amazon, why everyone is so obsessed and so infatuated with the show and just love it so much, but they haven't even considered the real like parallel between that show and The Truman Show. And even when there are comments on TikTok videos or on videos they say like, this is like a real life Truman Show, like we never thought this would have happened. Why is no one making the connection that that isn't something we want and that show is deemed dystopian for a reason? It's not present day real life biography, autobiography, you know what I mean? It's just, anyway. So anyway, if you aren't aware and you just clicked on this video and you've no idea what I'm talking about, Jury Duty is a show which is available on Amazon Freevee. I don't know what that is, I'm gonna be quite honest. Might be an American thing. Obviously I'm not American, as you can tell from my accent. And basically it essentially follows a Truman Show-esque style. It is technically a mockumentary. It's made by some of the same people who made The Office, I think maybe the writers or something. So it's in that kind of style. If you've seen The Office, you'd probably recognize the type of style. But they found this random guy on Craigslist and his name is Ronald Gladden. I will say, I accidentally say Donald once in this script. That's entirely my fault. I wrote the whole script with his name as Donald, but his name's not Donald, it's Ronald. So they found this guy called Ronald Gladden, and basically they said like, hey, we're doing a documentary on like juries in trials, or it might have just been a trial. I think it was juries though. So we're going to get you to serve on a real civil jury, but it's all filmed. We're going to do interviews. It's going to be like a documentary, but it is still a real case. It's a real jury, which in real life I'm questioning even now. Maybe this is just as someone who studied legal studies, who understands how juries work to an extent, more probably than the layperson, why he didn't question this, because yes, real juries can be filmed. Most juries, unless under like certain restrictions by the court, they're open to the public, at least criminal ones. Civil ones, usually if the parties agree to it, it is. If they don't, then it's not. But still, it's kind of like, wouldn't you start to question why this jury is allowed to have that happen? Because it would essentially compromise a lot of what a jury does, I think, in real life. But that's beyond the point. So that's why he wasn't fazed about the cameras or anything. He knew that the cameras were happening, but he's just some real guy. He's not an actor. Everyone else in the show are actors, and so the entire show isn't scripted. Some of it is scripted or there's plot points, but a lot of the show is improv, especially the jury members. Obviously the trial is pretty much scripted. The judge has things to say, the witnesses have things to say, but the jury members I think are more just given plot points or told what to say at certain points and not given an entire script. So the actor James Marsden, I actually don't know who he is. I recognize his face, I don't know what he's been in. He's in the show and they actually say like, this is the real guy in the show, so they call him James Marsden because obviously he's kind of recognizable. So he is in the show playing himself, but there are other lesser known actors. Obviously they're not unknown, but they're lesser known, so to avoid detection, and they're playing characters, not themselves. And James Marsden was still playing an example of himself. It just wasn't, it was himself to a higher extent. But everything is filmed. Not everything that they filmed was used. They were filmed over a span of 3 weeks. Obviously with editing, they gave us about 4 hours of content from that. And if Ronald at any point was starting to get suspicious or or they thought they need to throw him off the scent of the fact that it wasn't a real jury, they would just basically put him through hours and hours of boring content, and they just sit there as a real jury would, listening to stuff that isn't unheard of or things that aren't questionable in a civil trial. Full disclosure, I haven't watched the show. I've seen clips of it, I've seen interviews, I've done as much research as I can on it. I don't want to watch the show. I've seen as much as I need to. I think, honestly, if I tell you everything that I disagree with the show, maybe you'll agree with me, or maybe you'll understand why I don't want to watch it, but I think ethically, I don't want to watch the show. I don't want to participate in this show at all. Obviously, I'm making a video on it, but I don't want to participate in the consumption of this show. So you may be thinking, what's the issue? It sounds like some wacky reality show that exists, but the reason I take such issue with it is because this show is essentially a psychological experiment, and it did really mess with someone's life who didn't consent to what was going on in the show prior to it, and there was no valid or valuable reason other than entertainment to run the experiment or show. So they just mess with someone's life for the fun of it, to put it on TV. And again, you might be thinking, that's other shows, that happens, why is this such an issue? But this guy didn't know what was going to happen, and there's so much unintended consequences that came out of it, which I'll tell you all about. But I just think this show, just hearing about it from the description, we hate the Truman Show. Like, nobody would agree to the Truman Show happening in real life, I'd like to think. So why are people okay with this show happening in real life? Because it's just that in a different font. Like, it's same show, different font. But anyway, so I'm sure most of you know what a psychological experiment is, or you have some idea, but I thought just to put us all in the same playing field, everyone's got the exact same definition. According to the American Psychological Association, an experiment is a series of observations conducted under controlled conditions to study a relationship with the purpose of drawing causal inferences about that relationship. So basically, in short, it's studying the cause and effect of something. Usually you have an independent variable, so something that changes between groups, or something that you're studying what effect one thing has on another thing, usually human behavior or like medical stuff. It just the effect something has on another thing. That is what psychological experiments basically are. And for an experiment to go ahead in real life, in psychology, within universities, within research groups, whatever, you need to go up before an ethics board to have it approved, and they need to ensure that like it's ethical, that no harm is going to come to the participants, whether mental or physical. And maybe you're thinking like, what about the Stanford's prison experiment, or what about any other famous experiment from basically the 1980s? I mean, actually maybe that was basically the 1900s. If you think of any of the famous experiments, you're like, how'd they all go ahead if they need to be considered ethical? These experiments are the reason why these ethical procedures in place, because these things cause so much harm to people. And while we got valuable research about human conditions and behaviors, it is not worth the harm that was put onto these people in these experiments at all. And most people disagree with all the experiments that happened pre the ethics board, or a lot of them at least, because they just caused so much long-lasting mental and physical harm to the people that participated in them. But we will come back to inflicting harm later. That's a major point I have. But they also need to have informed consent from participants, experiments do, and not use deception at all, or if it's absolutely necessary to use deception, they must be actively debriefed and given access to appropriate counseling services if they feel the need to speak to a counselor, to speak to someone that understands what they're going through or can help them through it. And they must also allow participants to withdraw at any time, no questions asked. Just if you want to leave, say you want to leave, and we will let you leave, basically. So you're also meant to not give people any benefit to participate in the experiment. And I actually didn't touch on this in the script. I just like to touch on it now. He did receive a paycheck, which I read is about $100,000, which is a lot of money, of course. And I think he might have received some other benefits that I couldn't find. That wasn't my main focus of research, and these weren't offered to him before the experiment or show took place. So I don't believe this was breached, but I also think it's important to note that you shouldn't receive a benefit from a psychological experiment, because then it can compromise the results, because you are drawn to participate in that experiment for whatever benefit you're receiving, instead of actually just participating in the experiment from your own free will. Firstly, I just want to say it's arguable whether jury duty is or could be considered an experiment. However, I do, and the sole purposes of the show was to observe Ronald, I told you I'd do it, and his reaction to things that happen within the show. And honestly, I don't really know whether that would be considered a relationship between like a cause and effect. You could say that they were looking for entertaining reactions based on his reactions to the scenarios that were put forward to him in the show. I would consider that an experiment. Honestly, maybe I'm just playing really loose with what an experiment means, but I really think this show could and should be considered an experiment under the definition of what a psychological experiment is. And I think that's where our ethical issues start. It's just questionable whether it is an experiment, and something that is put on for entertainment shouldn't be questioned whether this needs to have ethical obligations. If you have to look at something on TV and be like, hang on, did they they check whether this person was able to withdraw? I mean, that should be considered in every show, but I mean, you shouldn't have to consume content and consider the ethical obligations within it and think, wow, they really didn't consider how this actually affects someone, like an experiment. There shouldn't be experiments put on TV for our entertainment. Honestly, maybe that's just my opinion, but I don't think that we should be viewing some kind of experiment just for our own entertainment. This experiment or show place without any outcome. They weren't looking for a thing or researching his reactions to say, hey, how do people react to when this person does that? They were looking for funny reactions to put it on TV. And they weren't doing it to further the human race or better humanity or find some insane cure to some incurable disease that they have. They were just doing it for entertainment and fun. Honestly, is the same reason I take issue with Paul Zimbardo and his Stanford prison experiment. Obviously, it's a very groundbreaking experiment in psychological research. Not putting that down. To say that Paul didn't do that partially for his own pleasure. If you don't know the experiment, basically put a bunch of college kids together and said, some of you are in charge, some of you are the people that are being in charge, like prisoners and your guards. And there's a lot, like there's so much on this. It's a pretty famous experiment. Basically, a lot of people wanted to withdraw. They were suffering and he wouldn't let them, and he was watching them and making them do stuff and doing things way past the brief that he presented that he was going to do. So you can't tell me that he wasn't doing that for his own self and not for like psychological research, which again is what I'm comparing the show to. They were doing this whatever reason they wanted to, someone else's entertainment and not for any real reason. And if we're going to call it an experiment, then that isn't an okay reason to hold an experiment, to make an experiment really. And that's why I don't understand why people aren't taking issue with this show, especially people, I mean, I'm not a part of any psychological community. I don't study psychology. I did in high school. I don't study it in university. I don't know if conversations are being had about this. Maybe it's not big enough for people to have conversations about it, but I still think people should be considering the ethical implications of making a show like this. So firstly, we're going to be talking about informed consent, and that's basically knowing exactly what you're signing up to and being able to fully say, yes, I understand what conditions I'm going to be put through, what could come of those conditions, like if I could have harm, what harm that could be, and saying, yes, I still want to take place in this experiment. Obviously, we don't know what Ronald has signed throughout it. We don't know if he signed something saying, I'm okay with this. Obviously, he signed something saying, I'm okay with being filmed, so you can't really have him on, you can't really blame the show for filming him because he said yes to being filmed, but he didn't know what was going to take place in this show. Like, he didn't know what was going to happen. He thought he was signing up to a documentary, so you can't really say that he gave his informed consent to be a part of this show. And even if it happened after, it's still a little iffy to whether that's okay, because he really didn't know what was going to happen and he didn't know what he was going to be put through within the show. And obviously, for it to run smoothly, he couldn't know. They had to use deception, right? Because that's how the show works. If someone knows, the reactions aren't real and it takes away the whole actual point of the show, and it wouldn't really actually be that funny anymore. So they're breaking the rule of informed consent. Deception can be used, but only in certain experiments. So I thought it was comparable to the experiment in Community when Annie takes the two guys into her experiment, and basically she says, okay, like, sit here in this waiting room. I'm gonna go out the back and get the experiment ready, and then I'll come back for you guys and experiment and test whatever I'm testing on you. And then the real experiment is actually seeing how long they'll wait for her to come back. So she comes back in 5 minutes and she's like, okay, we're still getting ready. She comes back in 20, and then I think they're there for like 8 hours or something because our bed doesn't leave, right? And obviously, if Annie had said to them, you know, oh, we're actually just testing how long you wait, whole experiment compromised. You can't see normal human behavior under that because they are aware of something that they're not supposed to be aware of, and it compromises the results. So you'd have to use deception in that case, and you'd have to use deception in the case of this experiment if it were to actually happen. In order to use deception, there has to be a certain number of things considered to make sure that it's ethical to use deception and you're not just doing it for the fun of it. So firstly, you have to make sure there's no other way to complete the experiment without being non-deceptive. I think in the case of jury duty, there is. I mean, how are you going to complete the show with the main person already knowing the premise of the show? You can't. And you have to make sure that the results of the experiment are likely to contribute to important research, to something that will cure disease or give us more insight into human behavior, something that is actually beneficial to us. And jury duty, honestly, sorry, it's not that beneficial. The entertainment is great. That's all that there is. It wouldn't be considered valuable psychological research, I'm guessing. And you also have to make sure that deception is unlikely to cause harm. Now, I don't know whether it's fair to say that the people making the show should have considered the harm intended, because I think anyone could predict some of what came out of this show that would happen that could be considered unintended consequences. But I think most people would be like say the fact that he became a celebrity, that could be considered harm. A lot of people will be like, this show was successful, of course people are going to love him, that's how it works. But then other people will be like, well, it's unintended, they only wanted him on the show, they didn't want him to be a celebrity. So I don't don't know if it's fair to consider whether it's an unintended harm or whether it's like, oh yeah, it's definitely going to cause harm, so we shouldn't use this deception. I'm not sure. But either way, I still think deception wasn't really used in the correct way. If this was a real experiment or you had to put this up before like an ethics board, they probably wouldn't be like, yes, do this, because the deception isn't necessary, because the research isn't necessary. Potentially deception if you put this into an experiment, if you were testing someone's reaction to something, maybe someone's reaction to just knowing everyone around them as actors, and you'd have to have that like beforehand, sure, but I think still deception would have to be used under a lot stricter guidelines. I think it was just too like wishy-washy. Yeah, it probably wasn't fair on Ronald at all. So now onto the harm cause, which I don't really know if this is common with fan base of the show. I don't know how much people keep up with Ronald's interviews that he's doing after the show, but basically he came out in an interview saying that he was completely paranoid after the show happened. He was questioning his own reality and feeling like he was still being filmed and followed, and basically still like he was in the premise of the show without actually still being on the show, which is completely understandable. Imagine you are watched and filmed and everyone around you is actors 3 whole weeks, and then you're told that that is all a lie, and then you have to come out of that and just go back to live your life. I don't even know what I would say. I don't know what I would do. And we know from an interview that Ronald said that he texted James Marsden and was like, oh, like I'm freaking out, like I'm paranoid and all that, and James helped him. Great. But remember what I said earlier, when appropriate counseling services or therapy should be offered, harm is intended and deceit is used? Clearly, or at least Ronald didn't take advantage of them. No counseling services were offered or made aware to him that he could use to kind of get over that paranoia, or at least control it to some way to understand what he went through. Because honestly, he even said he was really just overstimulated after all of it, and he couldn't take anything in when they told him that it was all a lie. And I think you need someone who understands psychology and paranoia and all that to kind of talk you through that and understand it. And that's the thing, right? In an experiment with a psychologist running it, a psychologist would appropriately and would have to debrief you if deceit was used in a way that you could understand what was happening. They'd have to ensure that you understand what had happened and that you knew, or honestly, they'd be like, you need to go to like a psychologist or a therapist to try and take it all in and understand it and process it and not have to be affected by it anymore. But clearly that wasn't offered, or not to the extent that it should have been, or he didn't take advantage. But even though like the crew told him, so it wasn't a psychologist telling him like, oh, you know, this is happening to you. So I just think it was really unfair to be like, put this all on him and then not give him any support or services or the ability to just process it all. They really just dumped this whole thing on him that they just did to him for the profit of the company, and was just like, yeah, cool, go home now, go and live your life. They didn't think about how this could actually affect someone and affect their entire life. Because honestly, as much as Ronald is out doing interviews now, he's living his life, there is not a part of me that believes, at least somewhat, he still feels that paranoia and he still feels affected by the show, and he still probably feels there are people following him or recording him. And honestly, like even after watching The Truman Show, right? Great example. I think most people in my class did, in my year 9 English class when we watched it, people feel like you kind of start to question your own reality even for like 5 seconds, right? Imagine that's your entire life for 3 whole weeks. You're being lied to that entire time. You're being filmed. Like your entire life is just The Truman Show. And then you come out of it and they're just like, cool, go and live your life. You're fine. Like that's one so cruel to just dump that on a person, but you would not be able to go and live and process that without forever just thinking about it in the back of your mind. There's no way that someone's able to just get over that. And then even beyond that, you'd probably be thinking, is the show actually over? Was that all a ruse to send me off the track of some larger production? Is my entire life actually The Truman Show? And they thought it would be funny to Truman Show me inside The Truman Show. There's just so much paranoia that could come out of this that they really just were like, yeah, it's fine. I'm not even going to consider it. And even beyond that, there is no evidence that we've seen. Obviously, we weren't in the screening process. Maybe if someone was in it, I don't know. There were apparently thousands of people that applied to be a part of this documentary, and Ronald was chosen. So surely there's someone out there that was made it past like some stage where this would have been an option. But there's no evidence that anyone was mentally screened for illnesses or just mental well-being at all. And I think that is honestly the worst factor in all of this, because Ronald could have been predisposed to something regarding psychosis or paranoia, or he could have had a mental illness that he didn't disclose, he didn't know about, or he wasn't fully aware that he had it. And then this coming out, like him living that life for 3 weeks and then them telling him, could have sent him into a full breakdown or a full, like he could have had mental illness caused by this. We still don't know if that's happened. It could happen. There's no telling what long-term harm this has caused to Ronald, and there won't until we find out or we don't find out. There is no telling whether mental illness could be created by this because of the amount of paranoia you've just put on a person, whether he was already predisposed to something and then you've just made that even worse, or whether he had something and you just weren't aware and then you've just made it entirely worse. Obviously, we know, at least to some extent, that Ronald is mentally well and healthy. We see him in interviews, he seems happy, he seems okay with the consequences. He's not trying to say that they ruined his life or anything. But what if it was someone else? What if it wasn't Ronald? What if they casted someone else who had a mental illness that they didn't even ask about, and then they went through this whole thing and then they just went to a complete mental breakdown because they couldn't process or understand what was happening? And I think that's just the major issue within the show. Like, I'm even getting worked up over this because they could have ruined or derailed someone's life. Like, they could have absolutely changed someone's life for the worse and just messed them up forever. And they never considered that, as much as far as we know, as far as the evidence I could find, there was no mental illness screening that Ronald or anyone else had to go through to be on the show. And I think that is the most messed up thing about this, that they really just didn't consider the fact that they could genuinely just like ruin someone forever just for the cruise of entertainment, like just because it would make a good show, just because it's funny. No one had two thoughts about that at all. And obviously there's precedents of surveillance within psychological experiments, clinical trials, even just in prisons. People are being surveilled constantly, and some people come out mentally okay, some people are like, yeah, I was just being watched for a certain period of time and now I'm out of that. But this is still a unique scenario, and obviously some people even suffer knowing that they're being watched the entire time and knowing that their life isn't a lie but they're being watched. And then you take this completely unique scenario where they're being watched the entire time with cameras everywhere and they don't even know it, and then you add that element, like that's even worse. So I can't imagine my own life having to live like this if that happened to me. If today someone came and knocked on my door and been like, hey, guess what, we've actually just been following you around with cameras for this whole time, your entire university degree was actually just for someone's entertainment, or something like that, you know what I mean? Obviously it's a bit different, but I'm trying to think of a way that I could be put in a scenario where that would actually happen. That would literally mess me up forever and ever. And even now, when I was writing this script just before, it was even like, you know, what if like this is happening to me and you don't even know it, because you don't know it until you've been told, and then you have to process everything that happened for that amount of time, and you probably can't. Like, I don't think our brains can fully comprehend that extent of like what happened. And even more on this topic, like I just mentioned it, but and this also touches on informed consent with filming and things. There were cameras everywhere. Obviously there were cameras in the courthouse, there were cameras in obvious places where a documentary, but they had to hide cameras, and that's what I found like really disturbing when I was researching this. They would proudly say, yeah, we had to really MacGyver this camera to look like it belongs so he didn't see it. And I get that that's the premise of the show. I'm not trying to diss the premise of the show. Imagine that sentence in any other situation. Oh yeah, we had to pretend the camera wasn't there and hide it behind a mirror so they couldn't see it and we could film them secretly. And I get we didn't see all that footage didn't come out. Someone had to watch all that footage. Imagine he had a like breakdown, or he was dealing with something really emotionally bad, or even just like he got some bad news or anything. Someone watched the footage. That footage was filmed and probably still exists somewhere. Like, at least with YouTube, right? I film myself and I can watch it back and be like, I didn't like how I sounded in that. I didn't like what I said in that. Oh, why did I make that facial experiment? It's fine. I'll just edit it out. I'll delete the footage. It never existed. This guy didn't have control over his footage, and he wasn't even aware he was being filmed for most of it. So he didn't even get to have that conscious choice in his brain. Oh, I'm not going to say this thing, do this thing, act like this, make this facial experiment, right? Make this facial expression, anything, because he didn't know he was being filmed. So he thought he was having privacy, and and even when they went to that restaurant in the show, every single person inside that restaurant was an actor. The waiters, the like other people sitting at tables, everyone. Imagine just going through life and everyone in that room is an actor and you don't know, but then you find out later. If I found out everyone in my English tutorial was an actor right now, don't even know what I'd do. Like, I don't know how I'd do that. Imagine you found out everyone in your workplace right now, someone called you up and was like, yeah, guess what? We were actually putting you on a show, and everyone in your workplace was an actor. Or everyone at that fast food restaurant you just went to was an actor. I don't think I'd be able to process that information, let alone deal with it. And I don't think anyone would. And I'm surprised Ronald can. And that's why I'm like, maybe he's not okay. Like, maybe we don't know. He hasn't even begun to process what's happened. I don't know. Like, I feel bad for this dude, and clearly he's fine. Well, not clearly, because you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. But he is going out and doing interviews and being like, I love my life now, you know, like I'm friends with a lot of new people, all that. So I'm glad that it turned out well for him and that he's happy, but it just could have not turned out well. And we didn't even consider, or the show didn't even consider, if they had hired someone different and it turned out completely different, you know? But I'm pretty sure the show didn't come out until they were entirely done filming, like they had completed the filming process. I'm like 99% sure of that. So I think he would obviously be given some rights, like if they were going to put something in and he was like, I don't really want that to be in, I think. Or at least I'd like to hope and think that they'd be like, that's okay, we'll all take it out, because if you don't want that, you didn't even consent to being filmed in the first place. So if you don't want it online or anywhere, then that's your right. The only thing that makes me question this is I did read in an interview, he said like, oh, I was wondering why they didn't include this scene, which makes me think that like he didn't get to watch it before it was released, but I'm hoping maybe like he saw all the scenes and was like, I don't want this included, and then they put it all together and they released it and then he saw it. Like, that's what I'm kind of hoping in my mind, and I think that's fair. Like I really am hopeful, and I think that they would have given him some kind of like editing rights in the process at least. But honestly, I just can't imagine living your life after that and not checking in every single room you went into, especially in public. There weren't cameras everywhere, you know. Like I just think that would really mess me up and make me a lot more paranoid in life. Another interesting thing that I read is that obviously the actors were just working their day jobs, and they had to go back to their families during the time of filming. So they made up this lie, you know, to be like, they made up this lie and said, oh, some of the hotel was booked so we couldn't get all the jurors into the hotel, so then we just sent some home and we kept some of the hotel. Which one, if I was Ronald, I would not believe that. I'd call BS, because sorry, we couldn't book the hotel, so we're just gonna send some of you home and not all of you, and just essentially compromise the civil trial that we're doing. You know what I mean? Like, how, I honestly don't know how Ronald didn't pick up on some of the stuff. And I get like obviously they tried to, their whole production was based around not letting him pick up on that something was happening. If I went into this and they were like, they did that, I think I'd pick it up at some point, you know. I don't know, maybe like obviously maybe he was given the information in a much better way, but when I was reading it I was like, if someone told me this, I'd be a little skeptical. So I kind of get like why the actors, you know, had to go home to their families. Obviously it's their day job, they don't have to spend all their time there. And considering that, you'd think that the directors and producers also went home, right? And I know some of the actors stayed on set because one was like Ronald's next door. He was in the room next door, so we couldn't like leave and go home, obviously. And he stayed in character the whole time, which honestly, commitment to the character. Like I respect him for that, because he was so worried because they shared a door in the middle of the rooms that Ronald was going to come in at some time. So he was in character the entire time just so he wouldn't be caught, with mad respect, like honestly. But you'd think like the producers and directors would be able to go home, which I don't respect, because if you're forcing someone to go through some kind of conditions, like Ronald not being allowed to go home to his girlfriend, not being allowed to use his cell phone, which I'll talk about in a minute, you would think they would at least partially put themselves through it and live in the hotel as well, because I think that's only fair. Honestly, I would think that it's fair to expect them to do that. Not the actors, but the crew that actually made the show. I think it's only right, you know. But with the cell phones, so apparently his girlfriend said before he went into the show full time that, oh, they're gonna make you give up your phone because it's like a trial. And then when they asked him to, they expected, like, they were getting the actors ready to kind of like put up a fuss, because they thought he'd also be like, why do I have to give you my cell phone? But because his girlfriend said before, oh, you'll have to give him his cell phone, he kind of willingly did it, and they were surprised. And then they all gave him their cell phones, and obviously the actors got their cell phones back, but he didn't during the time of filming, obviously when they were not with him. But you know, but what I think is kind of, it's nobody's fault. This is more just a comment on what was happening. You would play that back in your mind, considering whether your girlfriend was all because she told you that, and then you did it so willingly, and then people told you, oh, we didn't expect you to do it willingly. You would kind of think, oh my god, maybe my girlfriend like was a part of it, and obviously she wasn't, or maybe she was, I don't know. When your personal trust in people would obviously be so broken after this, because you've just trusted people for 3 weeks and they've all been lying to you. Add the girlfriend into that, obviously they didn't, but it just kind of happened. It would mess with your mind a bit. I think you'd have a hard time trusting a lot of people after that. Now, this is the biggest thing I have issues with above all else. This is the reason that inspired me to make the video. It's the reason I started having issues with the show and started thinking about it more. I've told my friends about this, but it's the unintended consequences of making Ronald into a celebrity. And I know Ronald has come out and he's been like, I'm cool with it, like I love knowing who I am across the world, it's such a cool experience to have. But I just thought I'd maybe try and put in another perspective, or explain why I have an issue with this consequence. And I'm also going to I have a script obviously in front of me that you can all tell that I'm reading from, but honestly, even in my videos, none of my videos have ever been scripted before, but even in my videos that aren't, I honestly never look at the screen either. But I have a script and I've just kind of been reading it, but this one I will try and read word for word, so I'll be looking off screen a lot, because I think it's really important that I convey what I'm trying to convey. So I have a YouTube channel, right? We all know this. You're all watching me on my YouTube channel right now. Maybe you've watched my videos, or maybe you haven't. If you haven't and you like this, you should totally subscribe, or even like haven't watched my videos before but you haven't subscribed before, you should subscribe, because I make cool videos sometimes. But in saying that, I'm putting myself on the internet. I open up myself to many different things, criticism, or becoming famous or a celebrity, or receiving mass amounts of attention just from putting videos of myself online. Obviously, I don't expect any of this to happen. As I've said before, I only make videos for the joy of it. I love making videos, but there is a little bit of me obviously wanting some attention, or wanting some fame, or celebrity, because otherwise why would I be putting videos on the internet? I'd just be playing Sims by myself, you know. I mean, that's my other videos, playing Sims. Or I'd just be discussing this scenario or other scenarios that I may make videos about in the future with my friends. I wouldn't be putting them online. However, I'm still consenting for all of that attention or celebrity, public knowledge of myself to happen. I'm consenting for this footage to go up on the internet and for you to all see it and watch it and like it or dislike it or do whatever you want with it. But I am putting myself onto the internet for other people to watch. Hey guys, I'm filming right now. Well, I'm editing this video right now, but I just wanted to add something in. I'm not consenting for negative attention. Obviously, I'm not saying, oh, come and hate on me. But what I'm saying is basically I'm putting myself out there in the public view, in public attention, and to some extent I'm like putting myself out there and expect to receive some criticism or attention or things like that, or hate. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying I consent to it, but I'm saying I expect it when I put myself out there. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt any less or more. Not that I've gotten hate before, but you know what I mean. I just wanted to make my point clear of what I was trying to say. Now, take my friend, for example, who I won't name because of this reason, but also I don't want to complicate people that I don't know would be okay with it in my videos. It probably applies to a lot of my friends and a lot of other people as well. So it's not just this one friend, and they probably won't even be able to tell who I'm talking about. I won't name them anyway. They don't like attention. They don't want to be famous. They want to remain a normal person their entire lives and live a normal job like most people do. They don't put themselves on the internet. They don't consent to themselves being in videos online. They don't seek out attention. Neither of these examples that I've given are right or wrong. It's not right or wrong for me to want some attention by putting some videos of myself online, and it's not right or wrong for them to not. However, I still think my friend, if this kind of thing, this opportunity that Ronald took to be in a documentary was put in front of my friend would probably say yes. They really like academics, they love writing essays, they love contributing to research. They would probably be like, a documentary is not going to make me famous. It's not going to put me in the public attention, because documentaries aren't really valued in society as much as a show like Jury Duty, really. So in saying that, Ronald never consented to becoming a celebrity. He never consented the public attention he would get or the criticism he would receive of this show. Not that I've seen a lot, but I'm just saying that he's never consented to any public attention, negative or positive. And while after the show he came out and said, I like the attention, it's okay, and he's gone to premieres, he's done interviews, he seems okay with it. That doesn't mean another person would be okay with it, and that doesn't mean he wouldn't be not okay with it in another circumstance, and it doesn't mean he at some point won't withdraw that being okay with being a celeb. Imagine if the reception of the show had been quite poor and he had to deal with the criticism that came for it, or if they edited him in a bad way and put that online, and then he had to deal with a representation of himself that he didn't want online. The show is essentially subjecting a person to becoming a celebrity, and while that's a dream to a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of you watching this video would be like, why is that a bad thing? I would love that. And no one's saying that Ronald doesn't love that or he wouldn't have wanted that before. But being a celebrity is not for all people. A lot of people who are celebrities regret becoming a celebrity or wish for a lot more of a private life than they have now. And we don't know the consequences of Ronald becoming a celebrity right now. Again, as I said, he could hate it in 5 months. He might hate the public attention and not want it anymore, but now he's opened himself to it and he didn't even consent to that in the first place. But also being a celebrity can come with a lot of danger, especially in the US. They can put a target on your back, people can disagree with you, people can put expectations on you. A lot of people love Ronald now, right? Which I'll go into in a sec. But now a lot of people might want him to act in things. But Ronald, I don't know much about his personal life. He's not an actor. He's never acted before. He might be a terrible actor for all we know, because these were his real reactions. I'm sure he is, and I'm sure he's great, but just putting it out there. And then say he acts in a movie, or he doesn't want to act in a movie, and then he gets criticism of it. Say he acts in a movie, and then everyone hates him because his acting is bad. Again, not saying that his acting is bad. I'm just saying this is a possible thing that could happen. And then Ronald is receiving a massive amount of hate, which he never asked for because he never asked to be a celebrity. He never put himself in the public eye before this. And being a celebrity or being famous or having some kind of fame can lead to a lot of a loss of privacy, and it often brings the expectations I just said. And people are expecting Ronald to be in the public eye now. People are expecting him to take on that role of celebrity. But again, in 5 months, if he doesn't want to, he might feel pressured to stay there because people love him and he doesn't know what to do with that. So he never wanted any of this, and now he's struggling with that mentally, and he's probably got that paranoia from being on a show where people just lie to you for weeks. And also, even another thing, which I think a lot of people don't think about when like celebrities, and because usually celebrities and relationships get into relationships after or like well before, or I don't know, I feel like it's a little different to the situation because Ronald has a girlfriend, but a lot of people were saying when the show came out that they were in love with Ronald, they'd love to date Ronald, he seems like such a good boyfriend, and then they discovered he had a girlfriend, and a lot of people started hating on the girlfriend, which I saw a lot of, and I also saw people hoping that they would break up or just expressing expressing disappointment in the fact that he is with someone. Now imagine how his girlfriend feels about this. She wasn't even on the show. She literally wasn't a part of any of this. The only kind of link she has with it is the fact that she's dating Ronald, and how she has to deal with all this. And maybe you're thinking, well, he's a celebrity now. All celebrities have to deal with this. And what did he expect? He did sign up to be filmed and put online somewhere, and therefore he should have to deal with it. But I don't think like he should, because he didn't sign up to this level of celebrity. He didn't sign up to any level of celebrity. He signed up to being in a jury in a documentary. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't intend to get famous from this. He didn't intend to have fans or followers. And I don't even know how to conclude this part, because this is the part that I feel the most strongly about, because I just feel like nobody considered, maybe he didn't want to be a celebrity. Maybe he wanted to just live a normal life, normal job, and have no attention. Now these people have just played God with his life and just said, this is who you're going to be now. Can he go on and have a normal job? What if an employer recognizes him and didn't like the show? They didn't like something he said. I mean, I haven't watched, I don't think he makes any hot takes or anything, but I just think they've messed with his life, and right now it's positive for him. But what if in future he can't live a normal life how he intended to, and he doesn't want to be a celebrity anymore, and he can't take that back. Nobody can take it back. Again, just I think the important thing to think about with this show is that just because Ronald is okay with everything that's happened, like seemingly, obviously we don't know, but just based off everything, he's had a positive reaction to the events. It doesn't mean that someone else, if they had casted someone else, they could have had an entirely different reaction. And it's not fair to just brush aside what happened in the show just because Ronald is okay with it, so it's fine, because there is still so many ethical wrongdoings here. And just because someone's okay with what happened and they're like questioning the ethics of it doesn't mean that it's not ethical and that it's just fine. It's great because he's fine with it, so it doesn't matter. It does. It really, really does. And it sets a really bad precedent for the way that entertainment and other things could be going in our society. And I just think that that is the issue with it. It's not Ronald as an individual. It's what if we put someone else in this situation and they have to deal with really bad negative consequences. I feel like honestly, if it was someone else and they suffered from a mental breakdown or severe paranoia from this, or he didn't want to be a celebrity and now they're receiving negative attention, I don't know what laws would be a part of this, but I think that they would have some grounds to sue, because they did lie to them about what's going to happen. And again, yes, Ronald's okay with it. That's great. But if someone else wasn't, it's not fair to be like, someone else would have been okay with it. You know what I mean? And one more thing before we wrap up that I just wanted to touch on. It's not insanely important, but I think it is kind of insanely important. And I think it really shows the way that they didn't consider ethics or someone's, really Ronald or whoever else that was going to be, well-being. And that's withdrawal rights, because I don't think most people think of it. I don't believe that there's anything to say that Ronald had the ability to leave the show or experiment if he wanted to. Because to be dismissed from a jury, essentially, I think what I understand of the process is you go before a judge and you say, this is the reason I'd like to be dismissed. It is because of this reason and whatever. And you usually have to have some kind of valid reasoning by the judge. And the judge can say, yes, you are dismissed, or no, you are not. And there's some discrimination factors where they can't deny their dismissal. But a lot of the time it's up to the judge. They can say, yes, you can, or no, you can. And because this show was a fake trial, technically, I feel like if Ronald wanted to leave, maybe he thought like I'd have to go before the judge, and you know, it's a weird situation, right? But say he expressed to one of the actors, I want to leave, I'm not doing well mentally, I miss my girlfriend, I don't understand what's happening, I don't want to be in this documentary anymore. The actors obviously would have pushed for him to stay. Him leaving is the end of the show, it's the end of their paychecks, it's the end of anything that would have come from the show. They would have probably had to restart or even never do this show. Like, I don't really know what would have happened if he had wanted or did successfully leave. And even with that, like, Ronald doesn't own any or control any of the content in the future. But again, that's a whole other trash fire to deal with. But I feel like, say after it got revealed and he didn't want any of the content to be released, they probably would have just vetoed it. Like, say for example, they revealed it, they were like, oh my god, we've all been actors this entire time and it's a show. And he was like, I don't want to be on a show, this isn't what I signed up for, I don't want any of the footage released. I don't know what kind of legal obligations they had to him or he had to them, but I think they would have just been like, too bad, you signed up for it, we're releasing the show. Like, I don't know if that's what have happened, because obviously it didn't happen, the show came out, but I just think that maybe there was consequences they didn't think about. Maybe they just thought, oh, anyone's gonna be happy to have all this stuff happen, but maybe someone wouldn't have been, you know. But anyway, he likely wouldn't have been able to leave, or if he would have, he wouldn't have known how, because how do you leave that situation? And 3 weeks is a long time when you think of it. That's like almost a month. He was missing out on a lot, he had a girlfriend, you know, stuff like that. But I've just never even heard that considered online. I mean, most of these points I've never heard considered anywhere apart from myself. But that one especially, I've never heard anyone even question that, because even if we put aside the fact that this is essentially an experiment, and we put aside all those ethical things, because they haven't been issues so far, and unless they repeat it and it happens to someone else, or Ronald starts to suffer negative consequences from it, or he disagrees with something going forward, I think those things, while they need to be considered, talked about, they're things of the past. But the withdrawal rights, I feel like, are important whether this was an experiment or not. It wasn't jury duty, it was a real mockumentary. As far as I've heard, they never stated to him that he would leave at any time, that he didn't have to be a part of it anymore, and who to go to leave, unless that's just not being made aware. And maybe it's not, because maybe that's just boring to people and they think nobody wants to hear about this. I don't know, it just leaves me with an iffy feeling, because if he was suffering, like his well-being was suffering, and a lot of people's do during trials, I think that really could have harmed him if he wanted to leave and he wasn't allowed, or he didn't know who to go to leave. So anyway, in conclusion, in saying all that, I believe that the show Jury Duty is insanely unethical, and they didn't consider the proper outcomes of the show that they were putting on, or their experiment. And I think if we replace the word show in the context with the word experiment, it truly changes our understanding and our feelings about what happened on the show and what could have happened. And I know they're speaking about filming it again in just like different contexts. I've heard we'll throw around a fast food employee or something, and obviously I'm not okay with that. But beyond that, I don't really know how that would work, because they've kind of like, the jig is up, we all got it. So I don't know how they'd get someone who didn't know about the original show, because even though I haven't watched the show, a lot of people I know haven't watched the show, but they've heard of the show, they know the show, they know about Ronald, they know what he looks like, he's been on the news. So I don't know how they'd get an unbiased sample, or they'd get people who didn't know what was going on in that consequence. But even beyond that, just gonna ruin someone's life, and eventually if they keep trying to replicate it, they will come up with the negative consequences. Like, say they had a population that was just completely separated and they never heard about jury duty, and they keep picking out people from the population to recreate the show in different experiences, they would start to see some of the things I've brought up in this video. Because even though it didn't happen with Ronald, or maybe it did and we just didn't hear about it, I don't know, any of the bad things that I've like brought up, it would start to happen with other people, because they got lucky that Ronald wanted to be, well, he didn't want to be a celebrity. I don't want to say that, because he's never said I wanted to be famous. He's okay with the attention he's receiving right now. Someone else won't be. Someone else will have a mental illness that this whole situation messes with them their entire life. They can never exist as a normal person or function again. Someone will need to leave and they won't know how. Just all the things that I brought up, they will start to happen if you had a population you just kept recreating this experiment, which is obviously not okay. But anyway, what do you guys think? Have you seen the show? Did you enjoy the show? Because honestly, as much as I disagree with it, I've seen some of the scenes. They're kind of funny, but also they're only funny because he doesn't know what's happening. I get that's the whole point of the show, but like at the same time, if you replaced an actor and they gave them that line, it wouldn't be funny. So how is it that funny? You know, when you start to think about how funny the show is, it gets a lot less funny. But anyway, had you considered any of the points I'd brought up when you watched it? Did you see a TikTok and you were like, ew, I hate that, or ew, I love that? Do you also agree that the show is unethical? Let me know your thoughts about the show, or let me know it's full of garbage and I don't know what I'm talking about and I should just go back to making Sims videos. And on that, actually, if you're someone who does watch my Sims content and you made it this far in this video, or even if you don't watch my Sims content, do you want more content like this? I'm obviously in university, like I stated, so I do write essays a lot, and while this isn't exactly an essay, it is a video essay of sorts, so I am kind of into this content. I mean, I go to uni for English, so I have to be into writing essays. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on the video or what I said or anything else. Just let me know, honestly. And of course, I will still let you off with the same outro that I do in every video, but I hope you have a wonderful day, night, afternoon, evening, whatever it is, wherever you are, and I'll see you guys. Bye!